So, welcome to Unfiltered Us, another kitchen recording session.
Because the weather is shitty and miserable and cold outside, so we are making goulash super.
Yes, and we decided that it's a good opportunity to talk about the topic of divorce, managing divorce, navigating divorce, and all the shit around it. In short. Yeah. So I was just busy collecting documents for my divorce proceedings, the separations proceedings, which are not going too well. You had
I had a very different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an interesting topic that we talked about a few times, how people react differently to
A relationship ending.
like how they, because I think everyone has the kind of idea that, well, if it would go wrong, I mean, we would do this in a civilized manner, right? It's like no question that there's no reason why we wouldn't do this in a
Do
civilized
you
way.
think everybody has that attitude?
Yeah, I think so.
I think some people are like, if you ever leave me, I will make you pay. I'm not sure that everybody's that mature to even think that they would navigate it in a mature way. I think, yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that think that, okay, first of all, it's never going to end, right? That's of
Yeah,
course
most people think it's everything.
well, hopefully most people think that. Well, not everyone. I mean, I have plenty of people who, like, if you ever have divorce number 3 or 4,
Going a little bit more skeptical.
I think there's a good reason to be a bit more skeptical about your own ability to keep a relationship up long term. And statistically, I mean, the numbers don't really speak for a great success rate.
Exactly. Yeah. What's it sitting around 40 to 50%? 50,
And I think
55%.
it's the closest to 60 in the Western world.
It's crazy.
And that includes only divorces or separations. Well, divorces technically that have legally executed, right?
Yeah.
It does not include all the
miserably married and emotionally separated couples.
Yeah. And then I think there's what's the name of the lawyer that we really like?
James Sexton.
James Sexton, correct? Yeah.
Our favorite divorce lawyers, New Yorker.
Great guy. Look him up if you haven't. Great YouTube channel, and he's been to a lot of podcasts.
He's done a lot of podcasts. So. He did a great one with Steve Bartlett, the Diary of a CEO. Tweet.
Yes, Steve Bartlett. Just quickly. Andrew Huberman, I think he talked to.
Yeah, I think him and Andrew Huberman are actually friends.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. So he's a divorce lawyer who specializes in the US in the more
high profile,
high tension cases where it's about
millions of billions
of dollars, and where everything else has failed. Like I think he even said, like, if you get me, then we're past the
amicable
phase of amicable negotiation, or even just civilized negotiations, and it's like it's getting brutal.
I think he describes himself as a pit bull.
Yeah.
And ironically, he is
the sweetest guy,
complete romantic. But what I find interesting is that he is the one who talks about having these open, honest discussions before you get married, and he's the one who talks about having a prenup in place and having discussions before you get into conflict about how you want to fight or how you want to resolve conflict or how you respond to conflict. And I think that so much of his advice is so good in terms of just managing relationships, actually. So as much as he manages the end of relationships, he says so much of what he does could be avoided if people just learn to actually navigate relationships better.
And talk to each other, right?
And talk to each other and have these open, honest discussions, a bit like what we were talking about the other day, right? Having the discussions before you having a fight.
Exactly.
So yeah, navigating divorce is not easy. I mean, I was very fortunate because my ex was, I think we both were very, very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think,
Yeah, you had from the beginning, and I mean, when this started for you, I mean, I think we've met before the beginnings of our romantic relationship when this had just started, if I remember correctly.
yeah.
So I think you were just in the middle of telling your kids about it and everything.
Yeah.
And so I could kind of witness the whole procedure, how this all happened.
Yeah.
Which I was quite impressed to be honest, because I was quite impressed. And I've seen some really dirty divorces in my circle of friends where things really turn into shit quite quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
But you managed to like do it in a very civilized and almost like harmonic manner, I want to say.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I think so much of it was just also, reframing things, right? So I think in a divorce, there's obviously two sides to the story at least. And then, of course, you've got your kids to consider if you've got kids. And I think if one can really prioritize doing it amicably for the sake of the children. How do we want these children?
Rather like not too finely.
Okay, like rough. Like that.
Even probably.
Like that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I think for my ex and I, we always had the view that we didn't want the kids to be negatively impacted by it. And we wanted to make it as seamless and as easy for the kids as possible. And so actually we had discussions about separating quite a long time before we actually told the kids. And yeah, I mean, I think for the kids, it was when we did tell them, it was incredibly difficult. They hadn't seen it coming because we hadn't been fighting. There'd been no sort of outward signs that we were unhappy in our relationship. And also they had their own perceptions of what they thought the divorce looked like and what they thought this meant if we told them that, when we told them that we were separating.
But you never went through a phase of you never went through a phase of like this whole high stress emotional.
Oh, of course I did. I mean, I absolutely like.
I mean, like not like you weren't like openly shouting and fighting and throwing things at each other
no, never.
And threatening each other with
never. No.
Physical harm and whatnot, right? So it's just
no, never. I mean, it was always very. I mean, I think we're both very mature and we're very. I think also in a way it just spoke to the fact that we'd been together for a long time and respected each other and in a way loved each other enough to let each other go, and to hopefully find the happiness and the fulfillment that we both wanted in a relationship. And I think the reality was that we had really just grown apart. But even if one can acknowledge that you've just grown apart and you want different things from your relationship and you value different things and you have different ways of expressing love or whatever, even if you can understand that and acknowledge that, it's still, I think, one of the most difficult things to navigate, the end of a relationship. And I mean, we'd been together, we would have been together for 25 years by the time we got divorced. So it's a lifetime, really. And
yes, it is.
Yeah, so of course it still had its huge emotional ups and downs, and there was a lot that I had to process and, really just sit with. And I did a lot of journaling and a lot of thinking. And I mean, even my friends hadn't seen it coming. They had no idea. And I had plenty of people say to me, "Oh my word, I thought that you guys were always so happy and you guys were like the perfect couple."
This interesting thing that's what's the name again?
James Sexton,
whatever.
Yeah.
He says, and he's mentioned it a few times in various podcasts, that divorces are like going bankrupt. It happens slowly, and then all at once.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a very, very good
It's a good analogy.
Right? Because it's right, and I've been hearing the same from my relationships, like, oh, but you've been a perfect couple, and how.
I thought you were so happily married. I thought you had the perfect relationship. I had no idea, until it was suddenly over, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that happens quite a lot where it's like an absolute shock, right? It's like, what do you mean? And it can look perfect from the outside.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like you don't expect someone that you see happily only ever. Or maybe social relationships that's, oh my God, how can that happen to those people? Like they were so perfect and everything was great, right? But no one ever,
the perfect family.
Perfect family and perfect everything, but you only ever see what's there from the outside perspective. That's
absolutely. What comes next?
We need the peppers to be. Sure. I'm gonna put this in here. It's actually quite a simple meal here. Yeah, and so when it happens, then suddenly it's like, oh my God, why this happened? And why you? I thought you were the perfect couple, and you can't be, and I can't believe it, right?
But I think even for me, it was difficult to understand why my relationship had fallen apart, because I think it was essentially a pretty good relationship. It was, and so there was almost a certain validity to that, because even for me, I mean, I was in it while it was falling apart, and I still don't really understand why or how it fell apart or what led to that. And I think that for me was the most difficult thing to come to terms with, was just the why and trying to understand why. It's not like either of us had done anything awful, or it's not like there'd been any kind of infidelity or any of that kind of thing. And so it was really just a case of us drifting apart. And I think I really struggled to come to terms with the why. And I still don't know, but I've had to just accept that it is what it is, and it was what it was. And that's, and to make peace with that. So that was quite difficult for me. But yeah, I mean, I think I was very fortunate that we could both always keep the kids in mind and really just try to prioritize them, and making sure that they were looked after, and that we didn't put the kids in the middle of our relationship ending. And we always said to the kids, actually we're still a family. We just, your mom and dad are not together anymore. Which maybe sounds a bit strange.
No, but it's true. Like, it's at the end of the day, there's, once you have kids here, there's always going to be a connection between not just two, but at least three people, right? Depending on how many kids you are. And whether you like it or not, that's not going to go away. And so.
How are we cutting these? Like fine or like?
Yeah, a bit finer, yeah.
A bit finer.
Yeah.
Like strips or chunks?
Like very rough chunks.
Like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then there were plenty of times where I had to really reframe something, where I'd sort of get upset about something, or tell myself some story, or something would happen, and I'd find myself reacting. And I remember this from a mindfulness course, and and we'd done a whole topic around beliefs and what we believe, and so often we're not even aware of our beliefs, and sometimes you really have to stop and ask yourself the question, like, hang on a second, is that true? And so he might have said something, and then it triggered some kind of response in me, which was then, something that was then on my mind and quite all-consuming. And it's amazing how your mind starts spiraling and you start thinking, oh, and he just said that because of that and that and that. And, it starts stirring up a whole lot of deeper underlying things. And sometimes you've literally got to say to yourself, just hang on a second, is that true?
Mm-hmm.
And so often it was like a story that I was telling myself, and I had to stop and sort of just do like a bit of a reality check or fact check and remind myself of what some of his underlying nature that I knew about him. And sure, there were times where what I thought was true, and that was then very valid. But plenty of times there were things where I sort of thought, okay, that's actually not true. Like in the past he was like this, or this is the person that I know him to be. And so I really had to remind myself quite often of that. And I really tried to believe in the best version of him, and not, I mean, I think we all have different versions of ourselves. We have good versions and bad versions, and it's a little bit like a yin and yang. I think we all have sides of ourselves. I think divorce can bring out those horrible sides of all of us. But I often had to just remind myself of the facts or the realities, and do a little bit of a check-in, and also just to sometimes give the other person the benefit of the doubt, and to sort of say, okay, well, I might be feeling like that, but let me give that person the benefit of the doubt, and let me believe the best about that person. And I really think that was what made it so much more bearable, and so I'd go into a discussion about financial things and just sort of in my mind think, okay, he has always looked after me and my kids, and I have to believe that he will continue to do so, and so those discussions, as hard as they were, I went in with a mindset that I didn't believe he was going to screw me over, and he didn't, but so I could also then go in the right frame of mind, which I think is really, really important, because I think if you go into these discussions, with a defensive sort of mindset,
defensive, aggressive, or loaded, like any of those three.
Yes, absolutely. That's 100% the case. Then you kind of, it's almost like creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. You probably going to get the outcome that you expect. What next?
And we're just gonna fry this. Don't throw everything one after the other.
Okay.
Essentially. And I'm seeing this with my current situation, where it's very hard for both sides, and this is not to blame anyone, it's just what it is, to take a step back and just rationalize things a little bit more. Saying, look,
Exactly.
this is what it is.
Yeah.
It's the situation, and we're doing no one a favor if we turn this into some sort of dirty fist fight.
I mean, in fact, the only ones that are suffering are your kids. Oh, and you and her.
Well, I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't say that, because actually everyone is suffering.
I think the kids are suffering unnecessarily in this situation.
Oh, absolutely.
They're being dragged into something that really shouldn't have any bearing on them, I think.
And in particular, if it then gets into kids being weaponized for achieving goals, which is not ideal.
No, it's horrible. It's really, really, really toxic.
And so why do you think it did work so civilized with you and your ex? So what was the factor? What was besides you making a conscious effort to not get pulled into an emotional state, why do you think this works well? Why do most couples or ex-couples don't manage to do that?
I think it's because of what the stories we tell ourselves, and we tend to, what always amazes me is that, you married that person because you absolutely loved them and you thought that they were the one and you thought that you were going to live happily ever after. And so, we've all had these amazing years or good times in our relationships. And it just amazes me, or it actually makes me really sad that we can forget that. And we can, they always say there's a thin line between love and hate. And I just think that that's quite sad. And yes, the relationship is ending, but does it mean that you have to hate that person? And I don't think it does. I think
it shouldn't. No, it shouldn't.
It shouldn't, and I think people get upset and they get wound up because they like, I don't know. It's like they take it personally. They take it as an attack on them as a person, or they let it sort of impact their ego in a way, and I think as soon as your ego gets involved and you feel like you've been hurt or shamed or not good enough or any of those things, it just brings out an insecure side of us. And I think when people feel insecure, then they tend to lash out and they tend to be cruel to the other person, and so... And because they don't want to sit with that negative emotion themselves, they don't want to sit with the rejection, or they don't want to sit with the hard emotions. It's much easier to attack and to blame the other than to take responsibility for your own part in that relationship falling apart, or to accept. It's much easier to attack the other person than to accept, and to be vulnerable and to sit with the negative emotions. It's like anger is much more, like, I think anger makes people feel powerful.
In what way?
Like if something happens to you, and you feel like it's a direct attack on you and your personality, right? If something happens to you, are you gonna cry and be hurt about it and be vulnerable? Or you're going to lash out and be angry and blame the other? I mean, it's a much more powerful position to blame the other, be angry, lash out.
It's an active emotion, whereas being sad is kind of like a passive emotion. Exactly. Like if you're sad, you just don't do anything. You just sit around and you sulk.
And you're just sad, right?
You're just sad. Whereas if you're angry, there's this active component where at least you have some
drive, right?
Some drive or some power over...
Power, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's an expression of power, and I think that people don't want to feel vulnerable.
Perceived
power. Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that it really actually gives you any power. I think anger is very toxic for yourself, right? I mean, I think if you're sitting with a lot of anger and a lot of because I mean that's also then just all of those negative emotions that you haven't sat with, you haven't expressed, you haven't worked through, and so. At the end of the day, you might express anger, you might lash out, you might blame the other person, but you haven't dealt with the underlying emotion. You haven't dealt with the sadness, you haven't dealt with the rejection, you haven't dealt with the, am I good enough or not good? You haven't dealt with any of that stuff. So it all just sits there and it all just festers. So yes, you can be angry, you can lash out. Invariably, it doesn't bring about a particularly good ending. And you still haven't resolved the underlying stuff.
Yeah.
So you just create this whole toxic spiral and you haven't dealt with any of the shit. That's your own shit to deal with. It's your own, nobody else can deal with that stuff besides you.
And in many cases, the anger just makes things worse. Yeah, in many cases, anger just causes a disproportionate reaction from the other side because it's then triggers a variety of emotions, right? It can be anger as well. It can be fear. It can be some underlying trauma, maybe. And so the anger, in that sense, that's why anger is an active emotions, because not only if you're sad, then the other person is like, well, they might feel pity for you, but it typically doesn't include them in your emotions. Whereas if you're angry with someone and against someone, then that always includes the other person, and it's not passive anymore; it's active, right?
And also, you feel like you're defending yourself, or you're doing something, or you're getting back at the other person. I mean, I think that there's definitely an element of revenge. It's like you you feel like you've had pain inflicted on you, now you want to inflict that pain on somebody else. And so you get into this spiral of like hurting each other and upsetting each other, making each other angry, because part of you feels like it's easier to pass it on or to get back at the other person for hurting you. I mean, and yet it just continues the spiral of hurting each other, and at the end of the day, it doesn't
resolve anything. It just,
resolve anything.
if anything, it's pouring gasoline into a fire.
Exactly.
Because then what typically happens, because if we're angry, it's typically from a position of, I'm not the one who's at fault.
Of course,
right? The other person clearly is at fault, right?
Of course,
it would never be me.
Of course, I'm perfect.
Obviously, it's the other person, right? And so, if you then attack the other person, often rationalizing that's to defend yourself, right? So of course I have I can be angry at the other person because I didn't do anything, right? It's also on that person, so I'm in a good position to attack the other person. But then the other person, when they're being attacked, they have the same emotional reaction. It's like, no, I didn't do anything. Why is that person attacking me? Then all of a sudden you have like two
warring parties.
Oh yeah. Two parties with war. And there's no solution to be found in that, right? So anger never leads to any kind of sensible solution.
So the thing is, in contrast, I think if, okay, so you decide you're going to end a relationship, and that's really painful. It's really hurtful. Even if you maybe weren't happy in that relationship or there were things that were fundamentally wrong, I mean, it's still painful to end any relationship, even if it wasn't perfect, right? No relationship's perfect. But so, unless you can just sit with that pain, sit with also the role that you played in that relationship falling apart, it always takes two, right? And unless you can sit with that and just accept the role that you played, accept that this relationship has fallen apart, accept the sadness, accept the rejection. If you can't sit with it, you will try to somehow push it onto the other person, express it as anger, and then it's also very difficult to forgive the other person if you need to forgive, and I think there's a lot to be said for forgiveness, and just I think acceptance has to come before forgiveness, like.
And the problem is, the moment you live out this anger and you act on the other person, whatever way it might be, sometimes it's just could be as simple as verbal abuse. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Could be as simple as verbal abuse, could be, in some cases, physical abuse, could be trying to manipulate the other person, could be trying to cause damage to the other person. The moment that happens, you not only have the initial situation, which is fucked up already, but you have the fucked up situation, and on top of that, you have additional hurt and additional damage and additional whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that's what makes just everything so much worse.
I mean, it's a negative spiral, right? So, I'm a big believer in spirals. You can either get yourself into a negative spiral or you can get yourself into a positive spiral. It's very, very rare that you're actually just static, right? Cheers.
So the question becomes is, what do you do to get out of that spiral?
So I think you've got to sit with a negative emotion. And you've got to sit with your own hurt and your own rejection and your own, the part that you played in it. You've literally got to sit in it. And whether you go and see a therapist or talk to a friend about it or, just suffer through it. It's like a dark tunnel and the only way out is through. You've got to go through it. And whether you have to journal or get support where you need it, etc. I think that the only way out is through. And I think to
maybe sorry to interrupt. Maybe just get back to the question. So what does it mean to sit with your emotions? I think a lot of people don't know what it means to sit with your emotions.
I mean, I think you've literally got to feel your emotions. You've got to, when these things come up.
How can you not feel anger? That's the question. And I'm trying to play.
Anger is perfectly valid. There's nothing wrong with anger. But often, I think, anger is masking sadness or masking hurt or masking rejection, So like you've got to sit with the anger and sort of ask yourself, okay, what's underneath the anger? Why am I in a rage about this? And if you sit with it and ask yourself that question and allow yourself to feel that rage or that anger, there's nothing wrong with anger. I mean, I think anger is a very, very powerful and a very good emotion. What you don't want to do is then take that anger and sort of spew it out onto everybody else around you, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to sit with your own anger, and you can scream, rage, shout, whatever if you need to, punch a pillow, go for a run, punch a punching bag, whatever. I mean, I don't think you want to I don't think you want to suppress that emotion of anger. You've got to feel it. And then, I mean, so often when I am in a rage and so angry about something, my next emotion is absolute sadness and I'll be in tears. And so but I've got to go through the rage or the anger, and then often then the tears come, and then I'm crying.
Can we put the only the carrots?
I shall try to only do the carrot.
More than.
No, to be precise. It smells nice already.
Yes.
And then once you've sat with the rage, sat with the sadness, or sat with whatever's come up, I found it particularly useful to journal, right? So I wrote many a long letter to myself, and really just, and I found the process of writing so beneficial, because it really just allowed me to explore my emotions and to sit with them and to really feel them, and to also then go a little deeper, like what's underneath that? Why am I feeling that? Why does this make me feel so uncomfortable? Why does this make me feel so sad? And it's not that you always come up with an answer as to the, like, for example, like, why did this relationship fall apart? Like, I couldn't come up with a specific answer, but it gave me some ideas, and just the process of going through that really somehow brought me some relief, right? But I had to do that by myself. I couldn't, and and yes, then I spoke to friends about it and that kind of thing. I'm not somebody who, I'm somebody who I will go through the emotion myself, resolve it for myself, and then I can talk to friends about it, or talk to you about it, or talk to whoever about it. But I'm not somebody who talks to a friend in order to resolve that. And some people, that's how they move through a lot of these things, I think, is to talk to a friend. And I think that women have a better support there. Not all women, but I think that a lot of women have, close friend or a sister or a family member that they can open up to and talk to about these things. And I think that can be hugely valuable. What you don't want to be doing is then spewing it out, on the kids or on your ex or the social media or whatever. That's not, it's not going to be a good thing.
Yeah. Can you talk about the journaling process a little bit? Because I don't think a lot of people know how to do that, or a lot of people have different ideas about it. So how do you journal? Like, what are your steps? Like, if you're angry about something, what do you do? Just what's the first step that you do?
Literally,
where do you start? But it sounds like a very self-reflective process, but I assume that there's a very chaotic phase, and then there's a kind of a sorting out different areas of what you just put on paper. So can you walk through that, the way you do it?
But I mean, I think that's the thing. There doesn't have to be a structure. And I think everybody's different. I find journaling useful, right? So, I mean, it's literally, I'll sit down and I use my my Remarkable, and I literally just start writing. And most of the time it's like, I'm so fucking mad, or oh my God, I can't believe that this has happened, or I'm so devastated, or, you know, and then I just start writing about what I'm feeling, and whatever comes up, I write down, you know, and then I either delete it at the end. When I used to write on paper, I used to rip it up and throw it in the bin because I didn't want anybody to see it, you know, but for me, there's no like formula or recipe. I just find the process of writing very therapeutic, and it helps me to get in touch with the emotions and the layers of emotion and what's going on, and also nobody else is going to read that stuff. It's just for me. It's not like I ever show it to anybody. It's not like I put it on social media or anything. It's just for me to process it. And because, and once I've processed it, it's like moving through that emotion. And sometimes I cry while I'm writing, or sometimes or whatever. And it's not that I get to the end and it's like, oh, it feels so much better. It's all resolved. Not necessarily. And maybe it's a few days of journaling on the same topic, but it's a process. But I don't think that there's any right or wrong as how to do it.
But how does it look like in practice? Because I'm horrible at journaling in the sense that I do journal, but it's more like a very brief note about what did I do today, what have I achieved today, what do I plan for tomorrow, what are things I want to put on my to explore list, to develop list, like self-development list, my business goals, whatever it is. But for me, it's often very just keywords and like, okay, so I felt like I did nothing today, but actually I did A, B, and C, and D, and I got very far with X, Y, and Z. And I found that I actually need to learn more about this, and I found that I'm very interested in that topic. And so that's where I journal, right? And so I have this template that I hate writing by hand. I love writing by hand if it's just a letter, but I hate writing by hand, putting my thoughts down, because it's just way too slow for me. So I like typing out stuff, but I never write like long essays around anything. So I'm just curious to understand. So how do you, like, if you're frustrated about something, do you start with a description of what happened, or what do you like? What's going on paper? That's what I'm curious about.
I mean, it's not like I said. It's not like anybody else has to read it, right? So it's not like I'm writing the story for anybody else. So and I think it's quite interesting. I mean, I think that there are different kinds of journaling, right? So this is purely therapeutic journaling. I don't even know what it's called, what it would be called. But I think there are different kinds of journaling. So for me, it's just an expression of my emotion. And I think the whole point is that it doesn't need to be structured. It doesn't need to be to follow a certain formula. It's literally just writing what's on your mind and writing down the thoughts that come up in your head.
Like a stream of consciousness.
It's just a stream of thoughts, you know, and stream of emotions, and they don't have to make any kind of coherent sense. It's not like anybody else has to read them. It's not like anybody else has to make sense of them. So if it helps to walk through what happened and to dissect what happens, then sure, go ahead. But most of the time, that's not what I do. So I think everybody's different. But also I think the way that you journal is probably quite typically masculine. You know, it's like facts and to-dos and goals and all that kind of thing, which is absolutely fine and absolutely valid. And
there's a little bit of like, I don't have time for this shit.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe you should try it. What comes up. But also, maybe you're not somebody who wants to do it like that. Maybe you'd rather talk to me about it, or maybe you'd rather. I think everybody's different, but I think we've got to find a way to sit with and acknowledge and accept your negative emotions. That's at the end of the day what I think is important. It smells delicious.
What's this? So we need paprika?
Paprika? You mean the peppers or the spice?
The paprika spice. we need I think there was an open one at least.
Could be.
If not two.
It could be.
Because I always try to find it, and then I find it, and then all of a sudden it's there.
It's like the sesame seeds. We can never find. It'll be red or orange. You did finish a paprika though.
Chili powder. You good?
What's that?
Chili powder. Okay, well, then it's open it. Fuck sakes.
And there's chili flakes as well, if you want. I'm just opening another one.
Yeah, no. So, no, for me, the journaling is.
Maybe it's not for you, right?
You know, and as you know very well, the one thing I hate is wasting time on anything.
Yeah.
And for me, the process of writing
Yeah.
things down, as valuable as it might be, it feels like a waste of time for me. So that's why for me, journaling just doesn't work in the sense that I couldn't sit down for 2 hours. Yeah.
How much? Just lots.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. I know it is.
It's not for hours. I mean, I sometimes write for 10 minutes. Often it's just for 10 minutes. It's really not that I'm journaling for hours. And it's not like I do it every day or...
Yeah, but it's for me. It's just like I don't spend enough time with it because it feels not right for me. So for me, the more compact version is probably better.
So what do you do if you're sitting with a negative emotion?
Well, it's a very good question, right? Because I'm only just ever evolving and learning how to deal with that. But what I found very interesting recently is after I was watching the Joe Hudson podcast where he talks a lot about sitting with emotions and just, he always calls it opening your heart to emotions, which I found incredibly weird initially. Like, how the fuck do you open your heart to being angry or frustrated about something, or being scared of something, or panicking about a certain situation? Like, how do you open your heart to that? And so I was really struggling with the idea and the concept of it. And he kind of phrases this in a very almost esoteric way, like, think about how you open your heart to someone that you really love. Like, you open your heart to a situation where, like, you see like a kid playing with a puppy, right? And you open, like, oh, that's like this. That's like, oh, it's like so cute. Like, and like, so try to think about that negative emotion in the same way. And I found it incredibly like, oh, Jesus, like, it's a difference if I'm looking at a kid playing with a puppy or if I'm just going through a fucking legal case or the 3 legal cases at the same time. And I need to somehow deal with that, right? But because there's implications on that. So it's like, I found it incredibly... I had issues understanding what he means by that and what he meant. But then the other day, actually... I was in a situation where I was super frustrated and I have like 2 or 3 things going on at the same time, as you know, right? And like different legal cases and some stuff wrapping up, other stuff starting, and it's all together at the same time, and it's incredibly stressful and draining and everything. And so then I was thinking about what he was saying, like opening up, but and like the opening your heart is like, oh, okay, well, I can in a way sit with it. Like, yes, I can. All right, so I'm feeling frustrated about something, so I can take a moment to feel the frustration, and that does help. Like, just as you said, like just sitting with the emotion. It's like, so I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm panicking about something, right? It's like, let me just consciously experience the emotion that I'm having at this moment.
Like, feel it in your body.
Just like feel it in your body, exactly. Go into your body and like feel it. Like, it's like if you have this, especially with these negative emotions, it's like this little tight knot in your chest. You just like feel it. Just like, I'm noticing, I'm feeling that, and it's, yes, the rational part is, well, obviously feel like that because you obviously just got like the next lawyer's legal letter in your mailbox, and obviously there's implications, and obviously there's a whole lot of shit that's coming after that. But that's the rational side of things. but then going down to, okay, so like, what do I feel? So that does make things better, right? That makes you like, it takes away a bit of the edge that you're having from that emotion, because if you're feeling it consciously, it's like, okay, well, it's a feeling, yeah. In a way, it's a feeling. But a couple of days ago, what I found quite interesting that completely changed in that situation my view on things was like, there was another thing coming in the mailbox, and like, oh, geez, like another legal letter of some of the things I'm dealing with at the moment. And then like, well, I can be like incredibly stressed and panic about the situation. It's like, fuck, what am I going to do? Or I can say, you know what, bring it on. Like, let's make this a fun game. Let's see like how much can we poke each other, right? And the moment, if you think about that, it's like, well, actually, it's like, okay. So if you say like, okay, well, there's a legal letter. Here's what I'm going to do, right? And the moment you shift your mindset from this is incredibly stressful and depressing to let's turn this into a fun game. Like, let's turn this into something that you enjoy doing. Like, let's how about we start enjoying like all these legal battles, and how about we start enjoying going to court, and how about we start enjoying, talk to your lawyers, like, here's what we can do. Like, here's how we can get you.
You do love poking bears.
I do love poking bears, yes. But the interesting thing is how that changes your perception of the whole situation as a whole, right? Because, yeah, it sucks, but the situation is a situation, right? Your emotions around it won't change the situation ever, right? And so how you deal with the situation is just purely emotional, right?
So basically what you did there was that you reframed the situation.
No, absolutely, yeah.
So you sat with it and you looked at it and you kind of in a way accepted it. And then you chose to look at what you believed about the situation. And you did an analysis of what you believed about the situation. And then you kind of went, well, I can choose to view it a different way. And so you reframed it.
Yeah.
And so like, I think reframing is incredibly powerful. And so often there've been situations where I've sort of looked at a situation, had all these negative emotions and all of these beliefs around something. And, a whole lot of stuff gets stirred up. And if you stop and look at it objectively and like sit with the feeling, look at the belief behind it. Is it true? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But then often the ability to reframe the situation, I mean, that can be incredibly powerful. You can't, and that shift in perspective is everything, because like you say, the actual reality doesn't really change. It's your perception of the reality. So yeah, I think that's so interesting.
And one thought that was going through my mind was, and it's a weird thought to have, but I was thinking of, if you think about Trump and the amount of legal cases he's been going through, and I think there was about 5 years ago, I read in I don't know, was it a Guardian or New Yorker, whatever it was, someone actually had a look at how many cases he had like in the last 10 years. And it was like 2,500, something like that. It's an insane amount, right? And of course, yes, he has the money to pay for all that, and yes, it takes away a lot of the stress. But he could be incredibly stressed about it. It could be, of course, like if you have like
even keep track
20, 30, 40 cases at the same time, just managing the stuff with your lawyer could be incredibly stressful.
It's always, he must have entire legal firms. Actually.
No, of course. He had like, he probably is like paying
millions of billions,
dozens of lawyers to take care of that. But then I'm sure he's not sitting. I'm pretty sure, like, well, you can think about him what you want. I'm pretty sure he's not, before he goes to bed, it's like,
awake at night.
Oh my God, I'm so depressed I'm having these 4 legal cases. He's like, well, fuck everyone.
Yeah.
And how about we start 10 more, right? Just piss off people, right? And piss that
But,
person
I mean,
off
I
in
think
particular.
he uses the legal system to his advantage.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I don't think it bothers him in the slightest. But it's an interesting way to look at your own situation and kind of go, yeah, okay. So, and also the reality is that, like, as much as those things are stressful and awful and horrible to deal with, moment to moment and day to day, you actually pretty happy.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and so as much as you have these stresses and you have these things hanging over your head, moment to moment, you perfectly happy and actually perfectly healthy, and actually moment to moment you're fine. So yeah, it's but yeah, I think also, you know, you were talking about the negative emotions and you know, and feeling them in your body, and I think there's a piece of it that's just acceptance, where you're just accepting it. You're just accepting that emotion for what it is. You're not trying to push it away. You're not trying to shove it down. You're not trying to suppress it. You're just accepting it, you know. And I think if you can accept it, and be aware of it and be aware of the emotion, I think that's critically important. I think it's the first step. And I think that the other thing is then if you can, and I know that you said the other day that you thought this was totally woo-woo, but I think if you can then offer yourself some compassion about it. So it's like the acceptance is one piece, but then to go, you know what, that's really pretty shit to have to deal with that. Like and to offer yourself compassion, you know, and self-compassion. And I think that's also really, really difficult to do. And that's something that you need to cultivate, you know, I think we beat ourselves up and we tell ourselves all sorts of stories about ourselves, and we our own worst critics, you know, and so that's where it also becomes important to just be aware of your own thoughts and your own internal dialogue, because you'll find yourself criticizing yourself, telling yourself you should fucking get over it, telling yourself stop being this, stopping that. You know, I mean, we are our own worst critics, and if I mean, imagine I had to speak to you like that, right?
Yeah.
You know, you'd be like, that's really unkind. Stop being so mean to me. You know, and yet we do it to ourselves. And so I think to be aware of our own inner critic and our own beliefs about ourselves, and then to kind of go, hey, it's not really very nice. You know, can you just be a little kinder? You know, can you just be a little bit more accepting? Can you just offer a little bit more self-compassion? And I think if you can start to shift to acceptance and self-compassion, then I think that also really helps a lot when you're going through these very stressful times, you know, because, you know, you're really dealing with so much. If you then, on top of it all, giving yourself a hard time, don't think that helps the situation at all.
Yeah, that's true. But it's...
Do we need to add this yet?
No, I would do that.
What else needs to be done? Do we need to chop some herbs, some parsley or some...
We can do parsley a little bit, yeah.
Some chives.
It's more towards the end.
Yeah.
Other chives, and then two chives are a good fit.
We had the potato salad.
No, I was just thinking about what you said in terms of the self-compassion, because there is some part of me that finds it a little woo-woo, as you say.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, self-compassion. Fuck you, what's that going to help me?
Pity party is not going to help me.
Yeah, exactly. Pity party is not going to help me. No, that's exactly it, right? That's where my mind goes if I think about these things. But at the same time, it's a part of embracing these emotions, as you said, right? It's a part of like, okay, well, it is a shitty situation, yes. And I have to deal with it, and it's not going to go away. But it's not going to go away whether I reject it emotionally or whether I accept it emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And the secret, I believe, is that the emotional acceptance of a situation
Mm-hmm.
will reduce one of the layers of a complication that you have. Because then, well, yeah, the problem's not going to go away, but you can deal with it a bit more productively. But if you have the problem and then on top of that you have issues with accepting it, and then you have issues with how you emotionally react to it,
and create sort of negative spirals of like sort of pouring gasoline on a fire, etc.
Yeah, and then that's not going to help, right? So so in a way it's the lesser of two evils.
Exactly. And so the thing is that essentially is a choice. And the thing is that actually gives you a lot of power, because it effectively puts you in the driving seat of how you navigate all of these situations. You are then no longer really the victim, actually. You're no longer being manipulated and controlled by other people's actions, because effectively, if you can control your response to something, then then they don't have control of you. So yeah, they effectively then don't really have control over your emotions, right? If they, it's like being a puppet, right? If you, when somebody else is pulling your strings or triggering some kind of emotional response in you, and you don't feel like you have any control over the situation. I mean, that's not a good or empowering situation to be in. Whereas if you are in a position where you can be aware of your emotions, be aware of your response, accept your response, moderate your response, respond in a way that you feel like you're in the driving seat, it gives you a lot of power back, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we're missing something here.
Sour cream.
It's a bit too thin.
It is. Needs, maybe it's...
The potatoes will do something here?
Yeah, for sure.
Ah, tomatoes, fuck's sakes.
Fuck's sakes. How many tins, huh? 2.
I would say 2.
I would say 2. So I think at the end of the day, you've only got... You can't control other people. You can't control other people's response. The only response that you can control is your own. Yeah. And if you want to control your own response or your own reaction to something, you've got to be aware of what is it that you're feeling? What is it that you believe in? Can you reframe it? And you then choose how you respond to the situation. But it's got to start with the self-awareness. So, yeah.
Great. All right. Right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed tonight's cooking session. As always, there's more to say about this topic. But if you would like us to discuss anything in particular, let us know in the comments. We're just building this channel, so we're happy about every comment, about every reaction, about every subscription. So please go ahead, like, subscribe, as they always say. And we'll see you in the next video.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Cheers.
Cheers.